World News with Remi Jurmain Djalis. November 4, 2025. I'm Remi Jurmain Djalis, and these are the world headlines. Tonight, a growing diplomatic clash between Washington and Abuja after former U.S. President Donald Trump declares Nigeria a country of particular concern, citing persecution of Christians and a failure to contain extremist violence. Also ahead, retired U.S. Army Colonel Carlson Macgregor warns that the United States may be preparing for another foreign confrontation, this time in Venezuela, amid concerns over oil, gold, and shifting global alliances. And later in the program, the debate over America's role abroad versus its challenges at home, the border crisis, the drug epidemic, and what critics call the politics of distraction. This is World News with Remi Jurmain Djalis, reporting from the Netherlands. Segment 1: The Trump-Nigeria Dispute. A fast-moving and deeply consequential dispute tonight between the White House and the Nigerian government over violence, faith, and accountability. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has declared Nigeria a country of particular concern, saying Christianity there faces what he called an existential threat. In a message that quickly went viral, he accused radical Islamist groups, naming Boko Haram and other extremists, of what he described as mass slaughter, claiming that more than 50,000 Christians had been killed since 2009 and that over 20,000 churches and schools had been burned or destroyed. Those figures have ignited a storm of political and diplomatic reaction. The Nigerian federal government has firmly rejected the allegations. In an official statement, Abuja said the claims do not reflect the situation on the ground, emphasizing that Nigerians of all faiths have for generations lived, worked, and worshipped together. Officials said Nigeria will continue to engage with Washington to clarify regional dynamics and ongoing security efforts. But for many communities, the reality is complex and painful. Local leaders and survivors describe repeated raids in the Middle Belt and other regions where attackers not only kill, but also burn homes, farms, and churches, leaving entire villages emptied. Thousands of families remain in internally displaced persons camps, sometimes for years, unable to return to villages that have been razed or are now occupied by armed groups. Observers say this pattern, mass killings, systematic burnings, and the long-term occupation of destroyed villages, is why some activists and lawmakers use the phrase ethnic cleansing. They argue that these attacks are designed to erase certain populations and prevent their return. In Washington, those reports have prompted a legislative push. Senator Ted Cruz and other lawmakers are backing a bill that would officially label Nigeria a country of special concern and authorize sanctions against local officials accused of facilitating or ignoring religious persecution. The bill's supporters say it uses U.S. economic leverage to encourage different behavior from Nigerian authorities, who, critics claim, have failed to protect citizens or relocate the displaced. Violence in Nigeria, however, is multifaceted. The country faces jihadist insurgency in the northeast, organized banditry in the northwest, farmer-herder conflicts in the Middle Belt, and criminal networks across other regions. Christians and Muslims have both been victims. Yet survivors in the hardest-hit areas describe a troubling asymmetry. While all sides suffer losses, some Christian communities report entire villages being burned and occupied, while similar attacks in Muslim communities often involve killings but less systematic destruction of property. At the heart of the crisis lies a question of governance and accountability. Critics ask why vast security budgets, hundreds of billions of naira each year, have failed to translate into sustained protection or resettlement. The perception that the state cannot or will not safeguard its citizens is fueling anger, political mobilization, and renewed calls for greater regional autonomy. Internationally, the issue is now becoming as political as it is humanitarian. Proponents of sanctions believe targeted measures can shift behavior without military force. Opponents warn of diplomatic fallout and urge caution, arguing that foreign pressure could further destabilize fragile communities or inflame nationalist sentiment. For ordinary Nigerians, the stakes are immediate. If Washington moves ahead with sanctions or halts aid, it could create leverage for reform but also strain cooperation on counterterrorism and humanitarian relief. The urgent needs in displaced camps remain clear: protection, food, shelter, and a credible plan for safe return and reconstruction. For the Nigerian government, the test is concrete: secure affected areas, prosecute perpetrators, and rebuild destroyed communities. For the United States, the dilemma lies between confrontation and engagement. Whether to rely on sanctions and public censure or pursue quiet diplomacy and technical assistance. The numbers themselves, 50,000 killed, 20,000 buildings burned, had become both symbol and warning. For millions of Nigerians, this is not only a statistic, it is a daily reality. The moral imperative remains: protect civilians, secure safe returns for the displaced, and hold accountable those who allow or enable violence. Segment 2: Escalation. Trump's warning and U.S. aid suspension. The controversy deepened when Donald Trump followed up his initial comments with a more forceful statement. In a post shared widely across social media, Trump announced that the United States is halting all aid and assistance to Nigeria, and that he has instructed the Department of Defense to prepare for potential military action. According to his message, Trump accused the Nigerian government of failing to stop what he called the killing of Christians. He wrote, quote, "If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists committing these horrible atrocities." End of quote. The post did not specify which group he meant. The most active extremist organizations in Nigeria are Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP, both classified as terrorist entities by the United States and the United Nations. U.S. military involvement in Nigeria has historically been limited to training, intelligence sharing, and counterterrorism cooperation. A large-scale combat deployment would be unprecedented. Trump's remarks came days after the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom renewed its call for Nigeria to be designated a country of particular concern. A bipartisan bill in the Senate also seeks to impose sanctions on Nigerian officials accused of enabling or ignoring attacks against religious minorities. Critics say Trump's rhetoric, particularly the phrase, "our cherished Christians," plays to his domestic political base, rather than reflecting formal U.S. policy. America remains a secular state, and its foreign policy traditionally avoids religious framing. Nigeria's internal conflicts, meanwhile, are complex. The north is predominantly Muslim, the south largely Christian, and many central regions are religiously mixed. The violence often intertwines with competition over land, resources, and governance rather than faith alone. Amnesty International reports that Nigerian authorities have failed to protect citizens from armed violence, resulting in thousands of deaths each year. Their data suggest more than 10,000 people have been killed in various conflicts since the current government came to power. Analysts point out the contradiction between Trump's threat of intervention and his earlier campaign promise to end forever wars. While it remains unclear whether his statement signals genuine policy or political theater, any move to suspend U.S. aid would have major consequences. The United States is Nigeria's largest bilateral donor, contributing more than $1 billion annually. Aid supports programs in healthcare, food security, education, and humanitarian relief, including $32 million recently allocated for displaced persons. If that funding is halted, experts warn of serious setbacks in HIV treatment, vaccination programs, and emergency food assistance. From Washington's perspective, the issue now sits at the intersection of religion, human rights, and geopolitics, a volatile mix that could reshape U.S.-Nigeria relations for years to come. Segment 3: The Venezuela Question. Colonel Macgregor's warning. Turning now to Latin America, where attention is shifting toward Venezuela amid speculation of possible U.S. intervention. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a former Pentagon advisor and outspoken critic of Washington's foreign policy, told journalist Tucker Carlson that officials may be preparing for a regime-change operation against President Nicolas Maduro. He claimed such an action could occur around early November, calling the idea reckless and unnecessary. According to Macgregor, senior figures in Washington view a confrontation in Venezuela as a way to send a message to Russia and China, both of which maintain strong economic and strategic ties with Caracas. He described this reasoning as lunacy, arguing that neither Moscow nor Beijing would fight the United States in South America. Macgregor also questioned the stated justification of fighting the drug trade. He said the origins of America's drug crisis lie within the United States itself, not in foreign countries. Calling Mexico a cartel state, he argued that bombing or invading other nations will not fix domestic addiction or border insecurity. Instead, Macgregor urged the U.S. to come home, strengthen border control, dismantle trafficking networks, and restore internal law and order before engaging in new overseas conflicts. He accused Washington's political class of turning foreign policy into performance, what he called a drama queen republic, obsessed with image rather than results. He described modern U.S. diplomacy as facades and theatrics, saying that real strategy has been replaced by constant media spectacle. The retired colonel also suggested that resource interests may be driving policy. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, along with significant gold and lithium deposits. Macgregor claimed that with global markets shifting toward gold-backed systems, certain financial elites in the West want direct access to those resources. He warned that any U.S. invasion of Venezuela would unite Latin America against Washington, spark armed resistance from militias, and further overextend U.S. forces already deployed in multiple regions. Following his remarks, the program returned briefly to its sponsor segments, an interlude common in Carlson's broadcasts, before resuming discussion about possible U.S.-Venezuelan negotiations. Macgregor said President Maduro had previously offered to reach a deal with Washington, but that proposal was rejected. Some insiders, he claimed, are driven by personal vendettas, including lingering disputes over allegations linking Venezuela to voting software controversies during the 2020 election. He cautioned that if the United States pursues another conflict out of political retribution, it could repeat the mistakes of Iraq and Libya, destabilizing an entire region while achieving none of its stated goals. Macgregor concluded by noting that despite Maduro's authoritarian reputation, his government has suppressed Colombian cartels operating inside Venezuela, a fact that, in Macgregor's view, complicates Washington's narrative. The interview closed with Carlson drawing a contrast between America's foreign adventures and its internal decline. He cited the rise of homelessness, addiction, and violent crime in U.S. cities as evidence that national priorities have drifted away from domestic well-being. Closing reflections. From Africa to Latin America, these two stories reveal a common theme: the struggle over how nations balance morality, sovereignty, and intervention. In Nigeria, the world watches a government accused of failing to protect its citizens while foreign powers debate when and how to act. In Venezuela, another government faces potential external pressure rooted as much in resource politics as in ideology. For the United States, these crises highlight a deeper question: whether global leadership today means confrontation, cooperation, or restraint. For the people caught in the middle, the displaced families in Plateau State, the civilians in Caracas fearing new sanctions, the hope remains simple: safety, dignity, and accountability. This has been Remi Jurmain Djalis with the World News, reporting from the Netherlands.